stuck between love and duty, or when your personal desires clash between society's expectations. If you do, then you'll surely love the timeless tale of Walang Sugat or Without a Wound, a classic Filipino play by Severino Reyes and the American revision in the form of a critical analysis. So buckle up, literary detectives, and without further ado, let's go! So for our learning objectives, we were tasked to number 1, provide a background of the author, number 2, elicit the elements of a short story, and number 3, provide a critic of the story and a concluding statement. To begin with, let's first have a background check of the author of Walang Sugat, which is the one and only Severino Reyes y Rivera. He was a Filipino writer and playwright. He used the pen name Lola Basyang and was nicknamed Don Binoy. He was born on February 11, 1861, and he died on September 15, 1942 at the age of 81. He wrote 26 zarzuelas and 22 dramas in his career. He was known as the father of the Tagalog plays and as the father of the Tagalog zarzuela. Reyes established the Gran Compañía de Zarzuela Tagala in 1902 and directed zarzuelas for the group. Ang Kalupi, the first one-act piece of the troupe, premiered at Zarzuela Theater in April 1902. In the same year, on June 14, Sarsuwelang Tagalog staged Walang Sugat, a drama set in Bulacan during the Philippine Revolution. Reyes also helped found the Liwayway magazine in 1922, where he published Mga Kwento ni Lola Basyang, a series of short stories. This was when he started to use the titular character Lola Basyang as his pen name, and the work became the magazine's most widely read feature. So now let us move on to eliciting the elements of a short story. So the elements of a short story contain the character, the setting, the plot, which also contains the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action and resolution. We have the theme, and lastly we have the point of view. Let's first start with introducing the characters of the story. We actually have two main characters. They are Tanyong and Julia. First, we have here Tanyong, who is a brave, young, and loving man in a relationship with Julia. He joined the Katipunan to fight for the Philippine independence and to seek revenge for the death of his father. Next, we have Julia, a beautiful woman who faces the challenge between her love for Tanyong and her duty to her family. But she still chooses love and freedom in behalf of facing societal pressure. For the supporting characters, we have here Don Miguel, the wealthy and influential suitor of Julia. He's manipulative and arrogant and is the antagonist of Tanyong. Next we have Puti, Tanyong's loving and supportive mother who worried about his safety but understood his will and sacrifices. Captain Ingo is Tanyong's father, who dies due to the brutality of the Spaniards. His death made Tanyong join the Katipunan for revenge. Juana is Julia's practical and insightful mother, who disliked Tanyong at first and wanted her daughter to marry Miguel instead. While Marcelo is a close friend of Miguel, who relays information between Miguel and other characters. We also have here Lucas, who is Tanyong's loyal and witty friend, who serves as his second hand and helps Tanyong through his highs and lows. While Monica is Julia's maid, who offers emotional support and acts as a confidant. Father Teban is a corrupt and oppressive representative of most of the Spanish priests, who took their religious position as an advantage for personal gain. We have Tadeo, who is Don Miguel's father, who is also an image of the wealthy and very privileged. Let us now move on to the settings of this story. One of the settings of Walang Sugat is during the Philippine Revolution of 1896. In the late 19th century in the Philippines, under the Spanish colonial rule, discontent and whispers of rebellion against the oppressive regime were present in these times. Next, we have Julia's house. This is the place where the story unfolds for the first scene with Julia and Daniel. The setting was also where Miguel, his father, and a priest went to meet Julia and her mother to discuss the arrangement for Julia and Miguel's wedding. Then we also have a prison in Bulacan. This is the next setting after the meeting between Julia and Daniel. This is where the arrested men, including Tanyong's father, were brought to and where their families visited them. Then we also have secret meeting places. After Tanyong joined Katipunan, the revolutionary movement had secret meeting places as an act of being careful not to get caught by the Spanish authorities. Another would be forests, fields, and roads. The story often diverted to outdoor places in the different scenarios, may it be for Julia and Tanyong or the other supporting characters' interactions. And lastly, one of the most prominent settings of the story, the church. The church serves as a vital setting for the story's turning point, which is Tanyong's disguise as its biggest plot twist. Let's now proceed to the story's plot, beginning with the exposition. During the late 19th century in the Philippines, during the Spanish colonial rule, there were discontent and whispers of rebellion against the oppressive regime. The story begins when Tanyong, a courageous man from a lower social class, arrives at the house of his girlfriend Julia, a beautiful young woman, where he catches her embroidering a handkerchief. Julia didn't allow Tanyong to look at what she was doing. But then, Tanyong saw the handkerchief embroidered with letters A, N, and F, which stands for the initials of his name, Antonio Narciso Flores. Julia disagreed and said it stands for Among na Fraile, which was actually for the friar or fraile. Tanyong got mad and wanted to burn the handkerchief. But then, Julia finally confessed that it was actually for Tanyong, and they promised each other to get married someday in front of the altar. Lucas, Tanyong's best friend, suddenly came to tell him that his father, along with a few men of Guardia Civil, got arrested for being accused as rebels. Families and loved ones prepared themselves to visit and give food to the arrested men in the prison of Bulacan. Captain Luis Marcelo was ordered by the Spanish fraile to continue to beat and hurt the prisoners, even though someone already died, and one was hovering between life and death. That is, Captain Ingo, the father of Daniel. The head of the fraile told Capitan Ingo's wife that he would be released and that the fraile would travel to Manila to tell the Governor-General to release the other prisoners. Little did they know, the fraile had a different plan to tell the Governor-General. He plans to kill the rich and educated Filipinos. Captain Ingo had only a very short period to be consoled by his family before he died, and when he did, Tanyong, his son, vowed to take revenge. For the rising action, Tanyong decides to be one with the rebels, despite that Julia hardly convinces him not to. In the end, Julia finally agreed and gave Tanyong his medallion or agreement. They again reminded themselves of their promise to love each other eternally, and that Tanyong will come back for Julia. His involvement in the Katipunan, a revolutionary movement, creates tension between him and Julia's wealthy family, who were loyal to the Spanish authorities. Julia's mother, Juana, pressures her to marry Don Miguel, a wealthy and influential man, believing it will secure their future. Her mother didn't know that Julia was waiting for Tanyong's return. A week passed, and Miguel, his father Tadeo, and a priest came into Julia's house to fix and plan for their wedding. Miguel was nervous and couldn't properly express her courting for Julia. Julia struggles with her love for Tanyong and the pressure to conform to her family's expectations. She then decided to write a letter to him and ordered Lucas to give it to him. Lucas arrived at the fortress of the villagers and gave Tanyong the letter from Julia. Upon reading the letter, Tanyong knew that his mother had already died, and his girlfriend Julia was marrying Miguel. Anxious and upset with what he read, he then asked for help from the general, and suddenly, the Spanish attacked and the war began. Lucas went back to Julia without an answer from Tanyong, while Miguel visits Julia again and said that they will experience a grand wedding. In the story's climax, it was already their wedding day, and Julia had no choice but to get married to Miguel. With the thought that Tanyong had already died, and because she didn't want to embarrass her mother, but before the ceremony began, Lucas arrived saying that there is news about Tanyong being seen. He was dying while lying on a cart. Tanyong was then brought to the venue of Julia's wedding. For the following action, in the reunion of the ill-fated couple, Tanyong had one request. Since he was already about to die, he wished to get married to Julia. And after his death, Julia could proceed to marry Miguel. Since Tanyong looked like he wouldn't last long enough, Miguel agreed to his last wish. Lastly, for the resolution, Julia and Tanyong got married. The priest pronounced them husband and wife. After the ceremony, in a surprising twist, Tanyong unexpectedly stood up and everyone shouted in shock, "Walang sugat! Walang sugat!" That meant no wounds. Tanyong was never actually wounded, and his disguise and injury were a test of Julia's unwavering love and commitment. Together, they escaped to join the revolutionary movement.
So we'll now proceed to the story's themes. For the story of Walang Sugat, I have crafted 3 themes. First, heroism and patriotism, love and faithfulness, and selflessness and sacrifice.
Heroism and patriotism. Tanyong's eagerness to join the Katipunan, together with the other members of the revolutionary movement, made them real patriots, as this act showed their fellow Filipinos the importance of being brave to fight and make sacrifices to achieve freedom and justice for their country. They inspired many to have courage in facing the challenge of oppression. This moral depicts that one should take responsibility to stand for what's right and be able to take risks in achieving their goals.
Love and faithfulness. They both faced personal and societal circumstances, yet their love for each other did not fail them. Julia was being forced to marry another man, while Tanyong still fought for the country's independence. Julia and Tanyong's affirmation is a testament to the power of faith. It tells the importance of being firm and keeping our word and fighting for our happiness and freedom. And lastly, selflessness and sacrifice. The play depicted the sacrifices made by many individuals in the fight for freedom and justice. Tanyong and Julia's acts of selflessness are giving courage, determination, and commitment to higher cause. This moral helps to reflect on our values and the potential sacrifices we could make for what we believe in. We should bear in mind that achieving such a greater cause requires willingness to risk everything. Therefore, we must be prepared to face any obstacle and make every sacrifice necessary to achieve our goals. Now, the play Walang Sugat utilizes a dramatic point of view. A dramatic point of view has no narrator, and the story flows through shifting from different viewpoints of each character who takes the stage. This means that the audience learns about the characters' thoughts and emotions through their interactions and conversations. Unlike the usual categories of first, second, or third point of view, which use I, you, and he or she or they by a narrator to narrate the story. So we're now moving on to my critic of this story. Every masterpiece has its strengths and weaknesses, and Walang Sugat is no exception. However, its story is to be commended primarily because it provided the topics and themes that many would love. These powerful themes like patriotism, love and choice, and family amidst social and historical issues, which continue to reflect with our audiences of today. The plot and characters effectively make up the story, as thrill and tension gradually builds up. The unexpected twist with Danyong's disguise added intrigue and excitement, creating an impactful and satisfying ending. It's also a good thing that the dialogues were mostly written in Tagalog, as it reflects the country's language and makes it accessible to many Filipinos. I also love the characters of Danyong and Julia. They successfully delivered the traits and qualities of the main characters, who served as great role models, not just in the past but also in present times. Danyong is a great inspiration for patriotism and faithfulness, whereas Julia showed her willingness to sacrifice and to fight for one's rights. Moreover, they both established selflessness and sacrifices despite the challenges, and as a play made during the Philippine Revolution, it offered knowledge and awareness about the significant periods and highlighted the sacrifices made by our historical heroes. However, it's important to note that even the most compelling stories are imperfect. I have identified certain weaknesses in this story, particularly having biases and stereotypes. To start with, Danyong and Julia's social classes somewhat depict a division between them as to how characters treat those who belong to a different social class, like the wealthy to the poor. A good example is Julia's mother, who was against her daughter's relationship with Danyong, who was part of the Katipunan, and wanted Miguel, a wealthy man, for her daughter instead. In my opinion, people might be dissatisfied by viewing this depiction as the continuous stereotyping and ignoring of difficulties of the society during the 19th century. Additionally, the play's conflict includes Julia's struggle between society's expectations and her choice for love. Hence, I believe this issue shows the traditional stereotypes for romance, where love and commitment are a huge concern, that marriage is a must for most men and women, without looking into the other factors that might affect this phenomenon. This might be as well viewed as limiting people's rights to find other aspects of potential for their aspirations and life choices. In the end, the story successfully portrayed and represented historical and political issues, including oppression and injustices made during the Philippine Revolution. It's crucial to note that the story's flaws doesn't make it less valued as a masterpiece made by our notable writers. In fact, it's precisely these imperfections that make it an exceptional work of art.